Right, so the Fab birthday stream is right around the corner, right? 6 years of Flesh and Blood. Super exciting, right? Next year is definitely going to be interesting because there has to be a lot of different things in the works, right? The big one being, of course, Blitz is on its way out and Silver Age is coming. So this is quite the substantial change. And I think one sort of facet about it that hasn't really been discussed or really thought about is what it means for the products of Fab, right? Because it is quite the drastic change, right? Blitz served as the entry point for the game, right? The simple way to get started, easy decks to grab and play. And essentially, Silver Age is going to take over that mantle, but with most likely heavier restrictions. So when it comes to, for instance, the advancements in the Armory decks, right? We were super excited because they became classic constructed, Blitz compatible, right? So, they were designed to take out X amount of cards and be ready for Blitz. Now, this is technically still doable, right? They can be classic constructed and Sage ready, right? But it does mean that they'd have to tweak the cards to make sure everything falls in line. And, that alone could lead to, for instance, miss amounts of copies, right? Instead of threes, so that we're happy for classic constructed, maybe only twos because they don't need a majestic for Silver Age, right? So take the Pleiades Armory deck. Her whole equipment set is majestic. The one thing that we kind of know for certain is no majestics in Silver Age. So none of the equipment, or the majority of the equipment that we see in these Armory decks to make sure that they are classic constructed ready, become non-applicable, right? So maybe new equipment gets slotted, maybe there's a mix, maybe we get some better geared rares, right? And Silver Age gets a little bit, spicier, I guess. But it is definitely a very interesting conundrum, and one of the things I really want to see how LSS handles it going forward, because we got to a pretty happy place, right? Cut the difference between classic constructed and blitz, because blitz decks have been a mixed bag throughout the ages, right? So it was really nice to have the armory decks come to this point where, again, there's that flexibility to have it for classic constructed or for blitz. But again, with Blitz gone, Silver Age replacing it, it does throw somewhat of a spanner in the mix, right? So if we take a look back through the products of Flesh and Blood, right, we started with the classic battles, and this was a fantastic way to get into Blitz, and a product I really miss, right? I just thought the design was lovely. We've had a go at First Strike, and then throughout the ages, through different sets, we've had different, collections of Blitz decks. We've had, decks by themselves, and then lately the bundles, but the bundles themselves also seem to have gone, right? So all of these products were, I guess, a test run, if you will, and to some extent, right, the old Blitz decks are definitely a lot more applicable to Silver Age, having, less majestics and more higher focus on rudimentary cards, if you will. That means that they should be a little bit more applicable. But it also means that, from the player base, they fall back in line with, we don't really care about them because once we're established in Flesh and Blood, there isn't really much meat on the bones, if you will, right? Incentive for us to pick up these decks. Now, of course, they can still be home to, new rares or anything like that. But overall, because Silver Age should be a lot more tailored, right? A better experience overall, heavier restrictions, a proper ban list, it means that LSS kind of have to moderate the cards that they are printing across all slots a little bit more dynamically, right? We have, the hair trigger majestic here or there that has to be dealt with. And now, again, if they really want to push Silver Age as a proper format, they will have to handle the reins a bit more closely than what we saw with Blitz, right? So classic battles again came with a bunch of majestics. So even the new hero Dorinthia Quicksilver Prodigy and her version of Dawnblade majestic. So unfortunately, from what we currently know about Silver Age, they wouldn't make the cut, right? You wouldn't be able to play Quicksilver Prodigy because she herself is majestic hero. Not to mention then, we got Glistening Steelblade, so that was a fantastic majestic. And then on the Rhino side, he did have Alpha Rampage, so straight away out of the box, obsolete in a sense, right? Because again, you can still play Blitz, and Blitz, will still be available, and I'm curious to see how long that sticks around before they just try to, really get rid of it. Because again, if there's no real support for Blitz in a competitive sense, given how competitive Flesh and Blood is, I can't see Armory's running Blitz just for the sake of running Blitz. Maybe there's a few people out there who want the fun of Blitz over whatever Silver Age ends up being. But yeah, all these products are now becoming, even more obsolete, right? Because they're not usable in the same fashion as they were designed for. it does make me really curious how they will handle products going forward. Do we again just stick with sets and armory decks? The armory decks just focus on classic constructed. There has to be something, again, if Silver Age is going to be this entry point for Flesh and Blood, then there has to be something to go along with it. Now, another set of cards to bring up and mention are the mentors, right? So all mentors are majestics, and they are, there's a different sense of power across them, right? We'll go with that. So, for instance, the latest one with Arachne from the Hunted bundle was quite a nice mentor. But again, the mentors themselves are only for young heroes, so they were made solely for Blitz. And again, they're majestic, so that breaks the mold of Silver Age. Now, I think I'm not alone in saying there's some level of hope that, we get access to some degree of specializations and maybe the mentors, right? Just have them as restricted, one copy a piece, something like that. But it is definitely an interesting thought because, again, up until the Hunted, obviously mentors were still a design principle that LSS were holding on to. But with, again, Blitz gone, Silver Age coming, they sort of get axed, or maybe they get reprinted, maybe they get downgraded to rares, maybe we get a whole new set of them, right? There's a lot of things up in the air that makes me really curious, again, about the birthday stream and what we get announced, right? Because, again, start of the year, going through all the products that were announced, the timelines, and then even the tail end of the year with the two new Armory decks, right? Arachne and Rhina, the thought was, great, right? There's some level of applicability to, again, still Blitz, but yeah, something has to be in the works. So for the first strike decks, these are probably a little bit closer to the power we want, as well as the usability for Silver Age. Now, it was still majestic in the Terra first strike deck. You had Thrive, but again, you take Thrive out and you just fill the slots, and these would be definitely workable as the next step up from what we had as the Blitz decks. Because again, right, I'm pretty sure most people don't really like the Blitz decks. They weren't Blitz ready. They were okay as sort of a learning experience. So sort of close to the welcome decks, if you will, right? So the new Bravo one or the old Ira one, right? And they needed some level of extra support to make them competable in Blitz, right? Or, you grab two, you stick them together, you get 3 copies, and maybe it's a little bit fairer for Classic Constructed because, again, you have that life total bump that makes it a bit more flexible. But yeah, if any product comes back, this is definitely the product I'd like to see. And again, it's branded as First Strike, not Blitz, so that does have some applicability. Maybe even this was, the initial thought, right? Where they were going to replace Blitz with Strike or something like that. So yeah, something to definitely consider, right? And again, it did bring some nice rares with it. So you had Canopy Shelter in the Terra deck and Static Shock in the Aurora deck. And both these were really nice rares. So, again, the way I would like to see everything fall into place is we still get new cards, we still get decent cards that are, again, nice for Silver Age and definitely applicable to Classic Constructed, but they do have to toe that line, right? They can't make it too good of a rare, because then that sort of breaks the mold that they want Silver Age to fit in. But again, it needs to be semi-decent for it to then work in Classic Constructed in competition with the majestic power level that we do have access to. Now, when it comes to the bundles, so again, we had various Blitz decks throughout the ages, very different in power level, if you will, right? Some nice inclusions in some of them. Sync Blows were in the Dromai Blitz deck, I believe. And then we had stuff like the Round the Table bundle, which again did feature some Majestics, did feature some cards that again will not be applicable as we know currently with Silver Age, right? And then, of course, Hunted, we still got Armory decks, but then nothing since. So I am definitely hoping that we get some sort of product to go with it, right? Because it feels like, again, if Silver Age is meant to be this entry format, it needs some level of support from those auxiliary products, something easier for someone to pick up rather than obviously a booster box and just assembling a deck from the miscellaneous pieces they get, right? But then, again, that brings us to the Rhino Armory deck and the Arachne Armory deck, and the other food for thought, which is, Silver Age being a reset, right? Because Icelander is sort of the face, so that's sort of hinting at, it will be a Living Legend point reset, right? So most likely, Silver Age takes the place of Blitz in Skirmish and other competitive events, right? Therefore, it gets its own Living Legend table and points, right? But with all the heroes reset, that means that the Rhino Armory deck could have some level of applicability because Rhino will be back. But with that in mind, again, the Armory decks themselves will feature Majestics. Majestics won't be available, but, there should still be enough cards in there to make it workable for Silver Age. Now, Arachne is a whole different thing because, obviously, it's a Chaos Armory deck, whereas Arachne Solitary Confinement, the young version of Slippy, is not a Chaos hero, so there'll be more cards in the Arachne Armory deck that don't quite fit. But, yeah, it does just make me really curious what products we will see going forward and how they'll sort of shape things, right? Because, again, there's that time lapse between product design and then we actually getting it as the public. So, this change for Silver Age, the axing of Blitz, that definitely has affected things. And maybe these were safe heroes picked, right? For the fact that, again, Rhino was gone in Blitz. So, say they were undecided on whether or not Blitz was actually going and Silver Age was replacing it. Because, I would assume these were sort of in print / designed around the time of Project Blue testing, right? So that sort of makes sense in terms of the timeline. But it does mean that, come next year, the sets, the Armory decks, and everything like that, I would assume that there is definitely a lot more input into what is applicable to Silver Age, right? So imagine with a set, right? You have all your limited cards, so they still sort of fall flat. But again, what I would like to see is a greater focus on the commons and rares so that, again, Silver Age does flourish. So yeah, that's sort of what I'm really hoping to see come Monday, which I assume should be tomorrow, right? As per my schedule of when I'm putting this out. So yeah, hopefully we see some sort of timeline and some sort of announcement, right? About Silver Age. I mean, it's on there, so we should, but it goes a bit deeper than just it becoming a format, it replacing Blitz at the competitive level, because overall it should be the entry point for new players. And if it's the entry point, it should have very valid products to go along with it, right? But yeah, overall, I hope it means we get greater support and not, again, just an axing of certain things so that, again, things are compatible with the expected restrictions, again, of Majestics, right, not being available in Silver Age. So yeah, a little food for thought, right? But again, change brings exciting things. So I'm really looking forward to the announcement and to see what's in the making for Flesh and Blood going forward with, again, quite the big change with quite the level of knock-on effects, right? So yeah, what would you like to see in terms of products, right? Would you just want Armory decks to sort of become a classic constructed focus thing and then we return to, Blitz / Silver Age style mini decks for us to pick up and get into the game, even if they have, again, that retracted level of power / card quality, if you will, right? Let me know. Otherwise, hope you enjoyed. See ya.